Do you love houseplants? You're in the right place. Welcome to Plant Prescription, the official houseplant podcast from Costa Farms. I'm Justin. I'm here with the lovely Michelle, our IPM manager, to answer all of your burning houseplant questions.
Hello, everyone. I love houseplants. That's why I am here.
So today we have 3 questions and a misconception to discuss. First off, it comes from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado. Jess says, "Hey, my cat knocked my Birkin philodendron off its shelf and broke a leaf. Can I propagate it from just that leaf?"
Pesky cat. Pesky cat. So, it's just a leaf that fell off. My gut says no, just because if it is truly a leaf with a simple petiole, like the stem that leads up to the leaf, then probably not. A lot of people have tried it, and some people have been successful getting roots from leaves. Like in the case of a Ficus lyrata, people have rooted those and they've rooted the leaves, but nothing ever grows from that because you need a node. And I'm going to let Justin explain what a node is.
So yeah, a node is basically where the stem cell tissues for the plants are. And it is required for most plants to be able to push out growth. I've heard a lot of plant parents refer to, like, when you have a Ficus lyrata leaf or one of the
Hmm.
Hoya caryi leaves, as zombie leaves, because you can root them, but they
Yeah.
never ever do anything more. So sadly for Jess, but good for Michelle, she's right that it's probably better compost than it is a propagation project.
Wow, that's pretty dark. Compost. Whoa. Okay. I will
Well,
say one
you
thing.
might as well make the earth better from the dead leaf.
The tragic cat disaster. Cat
Yes.
strikes again. Hey, I want to say one thing on the node before we move on to the next question. A node, how you can find a node, is basically the stem of a plant where all those leaves are coming off of. Where that leaf connects to the stem, that is a node. Is that's simple?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's
the
it.
junction of a leaf and a stem is how I usually try to say it succinctly.
Yeah.
So, same things, just a couple of less words.
As per usual. Okay. One last thing on notes, just because I have one more thing to say. A lot of it really is user preference on how people like root plants. I've seen some people root plants with like a single node and one leaf, and I've seen people take cuttings of a node and then keeping the leaf above it. Like, say you have a node where your leaf is and you skip down one, you cut there. So it doesn't really matter. It's honestly user preference. You could have as many nodes as you want, but overall, you need at least one node. Send nodes. Sorry.
There's there's actually a plant shop named that.
Send nodes.
Yep.
I can't say the word node without thinking of that. That's really good. Okay. Anyway, I think we've answered the question. What do you think? Or
I hope so. Jess, if you don't feel sufficiently satisfied, let us know, and we'll go into more detail for you.
yes, ma'am.
Question number 2 comes from Honeygrove, Texas. Emily says, "There's this fuzzy mildew growing on my peace lily soil. I'm afraid it's going to kill my plant. Help! What do I do?"
Before we dive into the question, can I just pause and say Honey Grove, Texas Honey Grove sounds like the cutest town in the world. I'm just
I know
gonna
it's so totally someplace I'd like to be, I think, right now.
right? I don't know. I just like imagine like people taking strolls down the sidewalk and sunshine every day and I don't know, bright colors. Anyway, Honey Grove, beautiful town name. Fungus, not normally beautiful. Jumping right into that. See what I did there? That juxtaposition.
Nice
Um,
segue, Michelle.
Thank you. Fungus, ugh, gross. But if it's just on the top of your soil, my gut says it's probably nothing too concerning. Now, that being said, there are some fungi that you can see on the tops of soil, like Rhizoctonia is one of the bigger ones. But that fungus doesn't really look like a fungus. Most of the time, it looks more like spider webs attaching to your like plant stem. Most of the fungus that we've seen on the top of soil is just saprophytic fungi feeding on something in the soil.
Hey,
Um,
Michelle, would you like to define saprophytic for our audience, please, for those who may not be familiar with the term?
well, I really don't like that you put me on the spot like that because I'm gonna.
You use the word.
Well, yeah, I, okay, I've never seen a definition of it. My understanding, and this is not straight out of Merriam-Webster or Google, okay? You're Googling it right now. I
I
can
am.
see
I
you
am.
Googling it. Let me take a whack at it. Saprophytic fungi are fungi that are feeding on decaying organic matter, and not really causing harm to the plant.
That is almost exactly word for word what Google says. Good job, Michelle.
Thank you. Okay. Woo. All right. Um, so anyway, that's probably what it is. Saprophytic fungi just eating dead and dead decaying matter, organic matter, not dead, just organic matter. And you could kind of just remove the top of that surface of your soil that and put more soil on top if you want to like clean it. It is worth noting that those are pretty much everywhere because fungi is a everywhere. And soil has a bunch of microbes in it. And so you can replace it. You could try to, they typically tend to show up in darker, more humid environments. Um, so maybe trying to put it under higher light or keeping it drier. But if it shows up, just scrape it off. That would be my recommendation. Justin, what would you have to say on that?
Um, so so I see these saprophytic fungi get blamed a lot for plant death.
Mm,
And it's easy to make the correlation. One thing I would take note of is if your peace lily soil or any house plant that you see it on, whether that plant might be staying too wet. And it could be a case of mistaken identity. It's not necessarily the fungus that's killing the plant. It's the amount of moisture in the potting mix and the roots are drowning.
yeah.
So that can be an indicator that maybe the plant is wetter than it likes to be.
Yep.
Um, so definitely keep an eye out for your watering on that. And yeah, if you don't want to scrape it off, putting a small, like one of those little handheld fans near your plant to increase the airflow over the soil, that can be a great way to knock it back. It's not at all a bad thing that it's there. I totally understand if it skeeves you out, and so something like a fan or moving your peace lily to a little brighter spot can be a great way to not have to look at it and not worry about it, but still have kind of that beneficial effect of it working on the decomposing organic matter to make more nutrients available to your plants.
And it can be a variety of colors. I've seen saprophytic fungi on the soil surface be anywhere from orange to, God, green sometimes, and obviously white and gray. And I've seen a lot of colors of saprophytic fungi. Could actually be kind of cool to look at if you're not skeeved out by fungus, which most people are.
Yeah.
Sorry. Shout out to the pathologists out there who aren't just like grossed out by fungus. But uh, the fan's a good idea, just say like that.
So would you agree with me, Michelle, that in that case you don't need to apply a fungicide, you don't need to do any kind of spraying like that? Because that's
I
what a lot of
wouldn't.
people follow-up question is.
No, I wouldn't. And mostly because a lot of fungicides, give or take copper, are not broad spectrum. And so they may not even work on that saprophytic fungi. So I wouldn't because you're just risking damage to your plant and possibly just wasting money. Um, I wouldn't try a fungicide. It's not really worth the risk, in my opinion.
Something else that just occurred to me too, is you could use like sand as a pot topper. Um, And if you
Yeah,
cover your potting mix with a layer of sand, your sand is going to stay dry enough that the fungus won't grow on it. And it can also help keep the fungus gnats at bay if you see them, uh, because they won't be able to lay their eggs in it. It'll stay
yeah,
too dry.
you could do that. Yeah. I personally have had a lot more issues with algae on my plants than anything else, but that's because I have extremely high light, high humidity conditions, and I like to feed my plants a lot. So I personally, like have issues with algae on my plants. Again, not really doing much, maybe just attracting in springtails, but nothing to be too worried about.
So thank you for sending in your question, Emily. Hope that's helpful.
In your beautiful town of what was it?
Honey Grove.
Honey Grove. Oh, God. Okay.
All right, question number 3 comes from Ashley in South Boston, Virginia. I want to repot my pothos because it's really, really root bound. But I heard you're not supposed to repot your houseplants in winter. Do I really need to wait until spring?
I've gone first on all of them. This one's on you. You go first.
Okay, so the personally, I kind of feel like the idea of you can't replant houseplants in winter is a myth, because it's not harmful to the plant to do so. Um, the one thing that you have to watch out for in a lot of places is that in winter your plant is going to be growing a lot more slowly, so it's not going to be taking up moisture as fast, and so you have to be really careful not to overwater it, or underwater it during that repotting process while it's getting acclimated to the new potting mix.
Mhm.
But I repot plants in the winter, without giving it second thought if I feel like they need it. Um,
Likewise, I do the same thing. I actually just had a quote unquote potting party last weekend. It was a party of one, me, and like 20, 30 plants. So I guess it was a party of like 30 individuals. Um, But yeah, it's winter here, and I did just pot up a bunch of plants, and they are fine now. Get that being said, I have a lot of grow lights and yada yada, et cetera, et cetera. So I typically don't even bat an eye, but if you don't have like a setup where your plants are actively growing, absolutely watch out after you plant it to make sure you're not overwatering because they probably won't be taking up as much. Now, with that being said, sometimes in the winter, the heat that you can the heat that's going into your house to keep you warm, the heat, can sometimes cause a really low humidity, and that can actually dry things out too. So just keep an eye on everything and just make sure after you pot it up, you're not keeping it too wet. Assuming, it's rooting in soil, which we're assuming it was rooting in soil beforehand. Gosh, as I'm talking, I see so many but ifs or like, but also, or with exceptions of. So, ooh, this one's actually a pretty loaded question. One last thing in the winter, if you pot your plant up, one additional stressor to watch out for is keeping it farther away from the window. Because if your plant is really close to a window and it's cold, that's stressful for most plants. So if you pot it, maybe just move it away from that window for a little while so it's not having an additional stressor on top of being repotted.
but be sure it's away from heating vents or other things because then you'll have the stress on the other side.
This is actually a really loaded question because every time I say something, I'm like, but if it's water, but if it's, okay. Anyway, you're fine. Just pot your plant. If you want to pot your plant, you don't have to wait whatever time of year this would like. If you're in February, you don't have to wait months um, until it's warmer. Don't worry. Okay. All right. We beat the repotting one into the ground. What's up next? It's misconception time, isn't it?
It is. It is. And this one is one that you may love, given your IPM field.
Okay.
Um, I've been seeing more and more people talking about use of spinosad to get rid of spider mites.
Really? Has it been successful?
So Michelle, do you want to walk us through why this is a misperception?
Well, Spinosad is, I think it's an IRAC 5 or 6. An IRAC for folks out there is like a fancy way of saying like insecticide resistant like action committee. That's what IRAC stands for. It's basically insecticide groups, and this pertains to their mode of action. So there's a whole bunch of options out there. Some will target the their, oh my gosh, why am I stumbling right now? Some will target their metabolic process. Some will target molting, and prevent an insect from molting. Others will target their neural pathways, neurotransmitters, and things like that. And spinosad is an insecticide in that group. And I believe it targets neurotransmitters is its main mode of action. But that being said, none of that really matters. What matters is the fact that it is an insecticide, not a miticide. So insects, 6 legs, mites, 8 legs. And they have very different biologies. So mites versus insects are just different. And if it is an insecticide, that means it will kill those 6-legged buggers. But a chemical needs to be labeled a miticide to kill mites. And spinosad just is, it is an insecticide. It is not a miticide. And so I don't know how it would work, unless you're just drowning them in water, aka like your water chemical mix. But spinosad is not labeled for mites. It is an insecticide. Is that clear?
It
Did I go
to
on
me,
too far of a tangent? Come back.
no, to me it's good. We'll find out from our audience. Um, and I just lost my train of thought. It's been a day here,
Yeah, yeah.
here
Oh
in my
God.
house. Um, oh, I have a theory on why some people may report success with using spinosad. Is that a couple of the common brands out there use a surfactant to help spread it on the leaves. And I've read that that surfactant is actually more effective at killing the spider mites than the chemical within itself.
That
And
makes
actually,
sense.
Michelle, kind of an interesting thing. Do you want to talk about what spinosad is?
Oh, yes.
Because I feel like I kind of just misstepped calling it a chemical, even though it sort of is.
It is, but it's a bacterial byproduct. And so I don't know all the details. I'll just tell you what I do know, is that it's like a soil bacteria. They've isolated, and when they put it through a fermentation process, it basically releases this byproduct. And that is what spinosad is. It's a byproduct of a bacteria found in a soil, right?
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
That's
I'm
my
pretty sure that's
understanding
what
of
it
it
is.
too.
So spinosad is pretty cool, because you're right. It's not like one of those synthetic chemicals that was created in a lab. It is kind of somewhat naturally occurring, although you have to like kind of force the process of it naturally occurring, but it is produced by a bacteria. So it's natural enough, you know.
It does kind of make you wonder how we found it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If it's a byproduct from fermenting
Oh
bacteria.
my God. Somebody was drinking a beer one day and they just sprayed some plants with thrips. Because spinosad, by the way, is primarily used for thrips in the biz. And they were probably, this is my theory. They were drinking a beer and they're like, oh, let me just spray this plant down with my beer. And because beer's fermented, right? No? I don't
I
know.
I think so. I think all alcohol is fermented, but
Okay, we're here to talk
I'm
about
not an
plants.
expert.
This is not our
All
field.
alcohol is fermented, beer is fermented.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
voice from above.
Woo, we'll never go into that business. Okay. But anyway, my theory is the guy was just drinking a beer. He sprayed out his plant. He's like, huh, the bugs are gone. And I don't know. I hope that's how we found it. But it does kind of raise a flag or a question of how did we find this by fermenting a bacteria? Like, what made us do that? Anyway,
I don't know. Yeah, to me, it's kind of like pokeweed. You know, one of those plants that you have to boil 3 times, washing it in between before it's edible.
How many people got sick before we discovered these things? Anyway, um, do you have any plant updates?
You know, I do not today. How about you? I'm putting you on the spot saying that, aren't I?
Ah, well, I had one and I just panicked and it went completely out of my mind. Okay, hold on. What was it? Uh, I don't remember what it was.
Uh,
It
any
was
sil- any Siltepecana updates? Any Anthurium updates?
Oh, well, my Siltepecana is very well fenestrated now. I wanted to give you a plant update on something that hasn't happened yet, but something that I will be doing that I'm excited about.
Okay.
Can I do that? It's not really an update. It's an update to come in the future. Um, so I've recently really started getting into Scindapsus, like many people out there. And there's so many Scindapsus. And I've had this Scindapsus exotica for years. Big, beautiful leaves, just trailing down a pot, touching the floor. And I have decided I would like to see what she looks like going up a wall. I see what she's looking like going down, but I want to see her going up. And so I will be creating a um, kind of like a Scindapsus wall to put her and maybe a few others up a wall, just grow them up a wall and see what happens. So stay tuned for that. Because I've seen that the leaves get very different on Scindapsus depending on how they're grown.
Interesting. I can't wait to hear about your experiment there.
Yeah, so not an update, but an update to come.
It's an update that you've made a decision.
Yes, I'm committing to it on air, so it will happen.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you are making a commitment to listen to future episodes. Um, as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via email, via website. We are happy to answer whatever questions we can. Happy
Yes, we
gardening.
are. Bye bye.